Hi everyone, welcome to the Community Hub seminar. My name is Josh, I'm the Community Hub coordinator for this program. Over the next year, we've been given this government grant by the government of Alberta to support mental health in the community and kind of use the church space for that. So we offer things like these seminars to equip people, to equip families, and to do tutoring for kids after school. Really just to be a space that as we go through the pandemic, for people to experience holistic health and so they can not just survive but thrive. Today we have Gerald and Judith with us today, and they are going to be talking about blended families. Gerald works with these families to address the opportunities that develop. He is a facilitator, professional, certified coach with Co-Active Training Institute. He's a certified human behavioral consultant and uses the DISC model of behavior. Along with his wife Judith, they are a dynamic team, and she's also a certified family business coach and is a respected leader in the wealth management industry. So today they're going to be talking about blended families and even share their part of their own story, but what that looks like with their family of 6. So without further ado, why don't we give them a welcome. And we welcome our live audience here in person, and we also welcome our online viewers. If you guys have any questions throughout the seminar, especially those who are online, there is a chat box function where you can type your questions, and I'll be monitoring that, and we'll also have a Q&A time at the end so we can ask those questions. Okay, we'll let you guys take it away.
Josh, thank you. If those questions come up during the time, we can also address them right away. So that'd be great. So here's a little quote that I received about 15 years ago. It's either me or it's him, but it's not both of us. And about 15 years ago, that was a quote from our, I think, 8-year-old, one of your daughters. And it was, we had just moved in together. We had just started blending the family. And the quote was, it's either me, i.e. me, or him, and I was the him. And it was, since that time, we've had a lot of fun. We've had a lot of interesting journey. And tonight we want to share with you some stories. We want to share with you some learnings that we've walked through, some adventures, and also some suggestions on how we can maybe make things a little bit smoother for your blended family. Do you want to say anything, Fred?
I'm all good. I was remembering those moments and I was thinking, oh boy, what have we got ourselves into?
So we've been married now almost 15 years. And maybe you could just hit that one slide for me. And the one thing I did want to say is that life is messy. No matter how much we try to control life, how much we try to work through it, life is messy. And it doesn't matter whether through COVID, it becomes messier. If you've tried to travel lately, it might be even messier. But there's a lot of things in life that just is messy. And blended families are one of them. Blended family, the definition, it was a family that includes children of a previous marriage of one of the other partners. And I always add to it somebody who's been through a traumatic experience. And whether that's through a death or whether that's through divorce, trying to blend that family, those children and yourselves have been through a traumatic experience. So when we move from the blended family to the objective of tonight, and that's basically to allow you, we're going to position you for the future, identify different adjustments that you might be able to make, and we're hopefully moving those challenges that you're facing to opportunities. We want to help bring your family together. The overview that we're going to do is to now go and look at the starting point. So if you think of a Google Maps, you always have to have your starting point, then you put in your destination, and what we're also going to add in, because life is messy, the detours of a blended family. The first thing we need to do is look at the starting point, whether that's the past or the present. So how do you move from the past to the present? There is no roadmap. There's no one answer that we can give you tonight. But what we're really going to do is help you build your roadmap. What is the direction that you want to have moving forward? We want to generate ideas and discussions. And it all depends on where you are, what is your situations, where your children are at, and where you are in your marriage. So there's a lot of all these floating things. So we're going to start at the starting point. For those of you that are online, if you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to ask them. For those that are here, jump in, let me know. It'd be a lot easier, no problem at all. The past. We all have stories. We all have stories of events in our life, either from when we were children, then when we were adults or teenagers, and then when we were divorced or grief. All those stories make up who we are and where we're at today. I often talk about scars and wounds. And if you think about when you have an injury, you scrape yourself or you cut yourself, it's a serious cut. You may end up having to go to the hospital and you have this wound and it's bleeding. And from that wound, you've got that, you might have infection, it might be oozing, but you have to go get it attended to. You have to go and get it fixed. Over time, that wound, maybe you got it stitched, but over time, that wound becomes a scar. And it's the same thing with emotional wounds and scars. Whether it was a death, whether it was a divorce, there is some emotional wounds. And you have to, over time, allow those to heal. And the question I'd have for you tonight, the first question, and by the way, I have lots of different activities and questions. So for you, those of you that are online, for those of you that are watching this, please grab a piece of paper and a pen. And if you do that now, here's the first question. What wounds or scars do you have? Do you have any wounds that are open that you need to deal with? Does your partner have any wounds that are still open? Does your children have any wounds that are still open? An open wound means you need to attend to it. You need to pay attention to it. And it's like the oxygen mask on an airplane. You need to put your own mask on first before you can address anybody else's or help your child's. And it's the exact same thing with your emotional wounds. Emotional scars. You have to address your own first before you can move forward. And that brings us to the children. It's a large change, just not for yourselves, but for the children. I've lost my mom. I've lost my dad. I've lost my family. Whatever those are for the children, they may feel that they're betraying somebody. They're betraying their other parent. But they've gone through this traumatic experience. And it affects children of all ages. Don't ever think that because they're older, because they're in their 20s, they're in their 30s, that those wounds and scars are not there. I was coaching a 30-year-old lady, and she had her own children, and then her parents went and got divorced. And then one of her parents was dating and getting remarried, and it affected her tremendously. So just don't forget that of all ages, it will affect your children. And ensure your children have a safe, reliable place. You are the best support and resource that your children can have. And one of the keys is communication with your children. Lots of communication. Listen, maybe talk a little, and then listen a lot more. Pay attention to what's not being said. Are behaviors changing? Are actions changing? Do who they hang around with change? All those kind of things. If they have to change schools, all those kind of things, pay attention to how are they doing? How are they coping?
I'm just going to jump in there a little bit. Just, as parents, we tend to take our children's behavior personally. We tend to think it's a reflection of our parenting. So when we go back to that opening comment, when we talked about my 8-year-old who, when we got married and moved in together, looked at me and said, "Mom, it's either me or it's him." I really, in that moment, had to ground myself and come up with an answer that didn't display any judgment or any anger. And, my first reaction was to say, "Are you frickin' kidding me after all this work we've done?" But what I did do is I took a couple of deep breaths and I just gave her a big hug and I said, "Honey, I get that there's change happening, but I love both of you." And so you really have to, as the adult in the relationship, even if you're not quite there yet, you have to kind of take that extra breath, take a step away, and show incredible empathy to the kids in terms of, yeah, they're not intentionally trying to misbehave. They're not intentionally trying to make you angry. That's their feeling, and you have to acknowledge that emotion.
For sure. And being aware. And then the next one of the next slides is around awareness, and that the personal readiness. And you need to start with your own personal readiness. How ready are you? You're more set in your ways. The older we are, the more set in the ways each of us become. We're not flexible. We don't adjust well. And so we think that everybody needs to think like I do, right? That's the way it should be. The new kids should think like I do. They should behave like I do, etc. So how have you progressed? And I'm asking you, each of you individually, how have you progressed from where you started? And moving forward, what will be different? Is your significant other ready for moving forward? And it doesn't matter whether you're in the middle of blending a family or just starting blending a family. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. You can always start today. Triggers from the past is one thing that I wanted to highlight for you. It's part of being aware. One of the things that when I was going through a tough time in my first marriage, my now ex-wife would receive a phone call or receive a text on her phone and then walk away. And, I found out later on that there was, friends that she was talking to, etc. But when we now walked into a new marriage, when we first got together, Judy would answer the phone, and it was probably more often than not was her work. But she would answer the phone and walk away. Well, that triggered negative feelings in me. And so I wanted to just highlight, what triggers do you have in your life? All of us have some. You ever go through a day where all of a sudden everything feels good, and then something happens, and maybe it's a car, or maybe it's like the example I just said, it's a phone call, that all of a sudden your mood changes. You become negative. Well, I needed Judy to help me to overcome that and to also support, so that she understood that when that happened, what happened inside me. And so I had to share that. And then you've been very good for the last 15 years on just letting me know what's happening. Oh, it's just work. Or, okay, I just got to take this, right? Those kind of things. Anything to add?
No, I'm all good.
The one thing I did want to highlight for you is on memories. Create space for memories, especially for your children's memories. It's important to them that they remember if it's through death, their previous parent, if it's through divorce, remember the good times that the family had. Allow them to remember. A lot of times we're afraid of the past, afraid of those memories. So we say, well, we don't really want to remember them because it might hurt us. But do you know what? The children need to remember those things. They need to remember those memories. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, that don't be scared. of those past memories. I now have an exercise for you, and it's a present evaluation. So if you have a piece of paper in front of you, and for those of you that are online, just grab a piece of paper and I'll talk you through this. It's just finding out where you are in your life in different areas of your life, and then what may or may not need attention. So I'm going to give you 8 different categories, and I want you to rank them from 0 to 10 as we walk through this. 0 being absolutely terrible, can't get any worse. 10 being absolutely fantastic, can't get any better. And it's not that we want everything at 10, and I'll explain that why later. But it's just about where you are from a scale of 0 to 10 on these different things. And I just want you to mark, as we go through this, mark down a number or an X, depending on what you want.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage those of you who are watching from home on the WebEx, if you are with your partner doing this exercise, I would suggest you do it separately. It's not meant to, later on you'll compare your results, but this is meant to be an individual exercise.
Thank you. So the first one is physical environment, your house, your home. You know, are your children sharing bedrooms? So how happy are you with your home, your physical environment? So that's the first one. So rank that from a 0 to 10. The second one being relationship with children. And not only just your biological children, but your stepchildren. So what is your relationship to your children? And rank that again from a 0 to a 10. And I'll just give you a minute. The next one being finances. So for your finances, where would you be from a 0 to a 10? And we'll talk a lot more about finances in just a little while. Your overall health, your overall well-being, your physical, spiritual, emotional well-being. How are you feeling today? It's a today exercise. Friends and other family. A lot of times when you go through, especially a divorce, friends tend to separate, where they used to be your friend and now they're no longer your friend, but they're your ex's friend. So those things happen quite a bit when you go through a divorce. So how would you rank your friends and other family? And your other family might be your own personal family, or it might be your extended family. The next one being significant other, your partner. And it could be romance, it could be intimacy, it could be just how that relationship's going as of today. And I'm not saying it's going to be an easy discussion later on, by the way.
And there are no right or wrong answers.
Yeah, exactly. The next one being previous relationship or relationships. It could be with your ex, it could be with your ex's family, because all of a sudden your children now they still have relationship with the grandparents of your ex, etc., uncles and aunts. There's many different relationships that are still there. And so how is your relationship with all those previous relationships? And the last one being fun, leisure, and recreation. A lot of times I know how busy blended families are. And the last person who gets fun and recreation are the parents. Excellent. So thank you for doing that exercise. Now let's just talk about it. If you have any area that's lower than 5, just kind of put a star beside it, because this may be an opportunity or an area where you may want to spend some effort and time, and maybe it's with a coach, and maybe it's your friends, or maybe it's your partner that you need to spend some time with. Or if it's a relationship with children, maybe it's something you have to pay attention to, and you need to build a relationship with one of those children. So all that indicates is that If it's lower than 5, it may be an area that you want to pay attention to. 5 and above usually indicates that you know that things are somewhat okay. And again, you don't need to be at a 10. If you have all 8s, you may have a happy, fulfilled life. It's all about what areas in your life need attention and what areas of your life you're feeling comfortable in.
I want to encourage you as well to not judge yourself in this exercise. It is just simply an exercise in self-awareness. You know, just because you show up as a 2 in fun, which is probably where I would show up, you know, doesn't mean you can't change it. You might be happy there, you might not be happy there, but there's no judgment in this exercise. And when you're sharing it with your partner, again, refrain from judgment. There might be some snide comments or some laughing or joking, which is fine, but really try and understand what your partner is feeling and where the gaps are in their self-awareness and their present evaluation.
And if you don't agree, that's okay. Have that discussion. It's all about discussion. It's all about communication. Excellent. We'll move on. The next exercise I want you to do, or the next question I want you to answer, in 3 or 4 words, describe the current state of your blended family. In 3 or 4 words, describe the state of your blended family. For me, and it's been this way for a little while, for our family, for me personally, it's I've got your back, or got your back. We worked hard to build kind of a tribe mentality, and for us, and for me personally, it's got your back. Judy, what would it be for you?
Well, I think when we started this journey about 15 years ago, it would have been, holy, what have we done? I think now it's, this was a lot of fun. That's too many words. This
okay.
was fun.
That's okay.
It wasn't always easy, but it was a lot of fun. And we still have some challenges. I mean, life is messy. You'll still have some challenges. But I encourage you, when you do that exercise, you might want to write it down in a journal or in a notebook, because a lot of it is also reflecting where you came from, right? So if you're not in a great place right now, you can look back and say, okay, I've got myself to a great place. I've got my family to a great place. If you are in a great place now and you get to a not so great place, you can go back and say, we have been in a great place. So how do we work our way back to that place?
How do we change? Absolutely. And I wanted to just share with you, there is hope for a great future. No matter where you are today, whether it's great, and it'll just get greater, whether it's good or whether it's bad, there's hope for a great future. You can change things. Things can change for you, and you don't need to be stuck where you are. The destination. We talked about the past and the present. Now the destination. You need to do some work on preparing and choosing your future. Each of us can choose what we want the next chapter of our lives to look like. What does the future look like for you and your family? I talk about 2 kind of mentalities of blending a family. The first one being a blender mentality. And that's when you think of a blender, you throw in the ice cubes, you throw in the frozen fruit, maybe it's strawberries, and then you throw in the banana, etc., and you hit the grinder button. Then you hit the button that makes it a little bit smoother. Then you hit the other button that basically now purees it all together. But it's a real grinding to get it all together. And what I've seen with families as well is they use that same kind of mentality. Let's all get together in the same house and let's figure it out as we go along. And you kind of force relationships. You try to force relationships. And I call that kind of the blender mentality. The other mentality that we probably adopted more was the mentality of a slow cooker, or the crock pot. So the slow cooker, where you would put the ingredients in, you turn it on low, and it slowly cooks. And when I talk about the slow cooker, we talk about small investments every day. And one of the things that I talk about very often is about relationship bank accounts. And when you think of a bank account, you need to make more deposits before you can take money out. So you make a deposit, and you make a deposit, and you make a deposit, and you have enough money that now you can go buy things. Well, it's the exact same way with your emotional bank account. You need to make deposits into the relationships of this new family. More deposits. And what are the deposits? The deposits are spending time together, taking them out for ice cream. Whatever the age group is, it's going to be a little bit different. But you make those deposits. You spend time with each other. You have family meals, and we'll talk about the importance of that. But those are the deposits. The withdrawals are a miscommunication, a disagreement. Maybe there's a discipline or something that blurts out that all of a sudden you're like, oh, that wasn't a good parent moment. We've had some of those. But those are the withdrawals. And you need to move slowly. To me, in talking to a number of different families, the slow cooker mentality tends to be a little more successful than the blender mentality. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, bad or good. All I'm saying is that over time, what I've seen is the slow cooker, the slow building of relationships, is a little more successful than trying to force relationships. Whenever I do speaking, I throw this in. There are 3 things I believe that every individual needs, and especially in blended families. First one, to feel safe. Every individual in the family needs to feel safe in who they are, feel safe in their family, and safe in their relationships. Second one, that they belong. That they belong to this new tribe or this new team or this new blended family. That they belong there. And the third one, that they matter. Who they are, what they do, how they contribute to the family matters. If you can picture in all the things we have in life, all the division that's going on with COVID, all the division politically, and all you have to do is look at the news, and it's really probably would scare you if you really paid that much attention to it. But what would happen to our world if everyone felt safe, felt like they belonged, and that what they did and who they were mattered? Your children need to feel that. Both partners in a relationship need to feel that. And as you go through that, the first part of feeling safe, knowing you belong, is that you need to know yourself. And this is the first part about preparing for your future. The first step is to know who you are, understand yourself before you move on. Now, how can you do that? Well, personal development. There's personal assessments. There's emotional intelligence. I do professional DISC personality assessments. There's books like The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. There's a number of different things that you can do to understand yourself first. Then you can help understand others. And why do you understand yourself first? Well, first thing is because then you can communicate better with others. You can communicate more effectively. The second piece of that is that really what you can do is have self-management. You can manage how you react, how your behavior is, so that when something is happening around and all of a sudden you've got a child that says, I don't want to be here and I don't want you here. All of a sudden, how do you react? How do you behave? Well, if you can manage yourself and you don't react to that, you diffuse that situation versus escalating that situation. So get to know yourself first. The second piece is knowing your values, your personal values. Each of us have grown up probably adopting a lot of the values that your parents have. And the same thing with your children. Your children have adopted values from who you've become. And when I look at now trying to blend a family, so my 2 children, I had a boy and a girl when we blended our family. You had 2 daughters. How the values that I put into my children were different than the values that were brought into Judy's girls. Now, the values ended up to being family values, but I'll show you what the differences were. So one of the values that Judy raised her girls with is the ability to speak out. If you were upset, just say it, no matter what, just say whatever. One of my values was respect. And so one of the things is that, for my kids is that when they blurted stuff and maybe it came out the wrong way, I would really say, well, is that very respectful? So now we're blending a family, and we got two sets of different values of older family values coming together. And now all of a sudden, her kids are just blurting out stuff, and I'm like, that's not very respectful. And so all of a sudden now, how do I deal with it? Sometimes it wasn't so good. Got to be truthful, right? Because all of us would say we have core values, and it might be honesty, integrity, and respect, the one I just used. But not all of us hold them as important as somebody else. What I would deem as respect or integrity, let's use integrity as an example, might be different than how you interpret and live integrity. But when I look at it and somebody does something out of integrity, because it's so strong in my life, I might get upset about it. So even though we say it's the same value, how we hold it and how we value it or how strong it is different. And then the family values. So you need to spend some time thinking about what are the values between the families, and then how do you mesh them.
Yeah, and I think one of the key learnings for me on that one was, in terms of self-awareness, when you feel triggered, when you feel angry, when you feel like you're not going to be your best self, it's probably because someone has inadvertently stepped on one of your core values. So again, have that moment of reflection. Train yourself to kind of take a deep breath before you actually have a reaction. And it is funny because I do remember that it wasn't just with the kids, it was me as well. Because I like to debate, I like to poke, I like to discuss. And Gerald would rather not. And so I had to figure out how to do that in a very respectful manner. And I still do sometimes. And it took a while to find out why he would react the way he would react. But to him, I was stepping on one of his core values.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think I'm going to steal something from Brene Brown. I don't know if any of you have ever read her stuff, but the story I'm telling myself, right? So the story I'm telling myself is different than the story he's telling himself, which are both different than the real story. So just remember that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I actually have her as one of the resources in the end of the presentation because she's a great read or great podcast to actually spend some time with. Moving on now to the blended family vision. Once you have the values, once you have some of that, then what is the vision? What is the culture or atmosphere you want to create? For us, we never really we didn't call us the new family. We didn't want to create a family as per se. Now, we wanted to create everything about it, but to use that word family was something that the girls and even my kids hesitated at because they had families. So so we really focused on building a team or a tribe. And so once we used those definitions, all of a sudden what our vision was or what the culture was a little bit different than some of the names, some of the other names. So I hope you understand that there was what atmosphere. We wanted to create an atmosphere of a team. We wanted to create that atmosphere of I've got your back. But we didn't want to force an atmosphere of this is a family and be a family. Because that's kind of going back to that blender mentality. So what's your vision of the family? What are your family goals? And those are some of the questions just for you to start thinking about. And the one thing I put at the end is start dreaming again. A lot of times when we go through the grief, we go through the separations of divorce, we stop dreaming. We stop having those dreams about a fantastic life in the future. We just say, oh, it's going to be whatever it's going to be. Make it happen. You can make it happen. You can make those changes.
And I think around family vision as well, again, depending on the age of the children that you're blending, they can participate in that. I hope you don't mind me sharing this. So Gerald is the artsy-fartsy one in our relationship. And so early on in the blending of our family, he bought a talking stick. And we all rolled our eyes. And when we had family meetings or whatever we wanted to call them, we would actually, and the kids at that time, the youngest was 8 and the oldest was 16. And we would actually give each child, each family member or tribe member, the ability to hold the stick. And when they were holding the stick, we had to listen. And it helped us understand what their vision of the family was as well. So I think there's, again, depending on the age of the children involved, there's an opportunity to include that. What would make you happy? What sort of things do you want to do as a family? What makes you angry? What makes you sad? Again, age-appropriate questions to help kind of blend the vision of the blended family.
And I was mocked for many years about the talking stick, by the way. But what it is that the talking stick, I just wanted to clarify for you, is that when you have the stick, nobody else can talk. They have to listen. And the only time you can talk or respond is by asking for the stick, and we made sure it went around the circle that everybody had an opportunity to. But if you wanted to respond to what somebody was saying, you had to ask for the stick. You get it, then you can talk. And we use that strictly for, it's a coaching tool that I've utilized in different areas, but it's one that forces people to listen. And so if it's good for you, use it, but you will be mocked for it. From those family meetings, you can have a strong foundation. One of the things that we had to discuss right up front is what were the expectations that we had of our children, what are the expectations we had of ourselves and of our relationship. And again, the team versus family, what were the non-negotiables? What are your non-negotiables? And I hope you know what that means. It means that it's something that you cannot accept coming from your children or from the relationship that you have with your partner. What are those non-negotiables? And have those right up front, have those discussions. And again, depending on the age of the children, have those discussions with the children so that they can understand what they are as well.
So one of my non-negotiables as a working mom with now 4 children was I was not making school lunches and I was not doing laundry. So we had a make your school lunch little session. And at one point, every child was marched downstairs to the laundry room and shown how to separate colors and whites, and they did their own laundry. I just knew that I wanted to free up that time so I could actually spend it developing relationships. And it did 2 things. Well, first of all, it made the kids a little angry with me, but it made them super independent. And even now our 25-year-old says, what mother makes their 8-year-old do laundry? That would be me.
And they did, by the way. One of the other foundations, what assumptions is everybody coming into the relationships with? And especially if you have teenagers, and maybe you have everything down from teenagers. We had by the time we got married or shortly after we were married, we had like a 17 or 18-year-old down to 11-year-old. Well, obviously the teenagers got different assumptions coming in than what the youngest child would have. So what are those assumptions? And have those discussions. Don't just let them all go. Because do you expect the teenager to come to family meals? Or do you not? If they're working, do you wait for the family meal before they come home? Those are all different decisions that we made as we went through. And then how to live together and the small details. So I'm going to share a story, or do you want to share the story?
No, you go for it.
So we just moved in together, and my daughter, who at that time was in junior high, she was some of the time in our household, some of the time with her mom. And the time that she was with us, we had to drive her to school. So she would get up with us, she'd have breakfast with us, or some type of breakfast, whatever she wanted. And we'd be all in the kitchen together at the same time. Well, Judy, being the morning person, would get up and say, well, hey, how are you?
How was your sleep?
How's your sleep? What are you doing today? What's at school today? And da-da-da-da-da-da. And she would get grunt answers. So it didn't take us long. It kind of kicked in for me. It said, do you know what? We probably need to just back that off a little bit and just give her that space and time. Now, it worked out that while we were driving her, you could ask those questions. But when she first got up in the morning until she had that breakfast, it was like, let's not push that. But those are the small things that you need to listen to and look for when you're blending the family. Because, naturally, over time, I never did that because it was just one of the things we never did. We never had that question period time before. And then all of a sudden now we're blending a family, and Judy's really a morning person. And she was like, and
What are your goals for today? What are you going to accomplish?
And by the way, we always embarrass our kids by saying before they left.
Make good choices.
So yeah. And the final thing I wanted to share with around building a strong foundation and preparing for the future is what your destination is. Create happy memories. I want to share this with you. You are creating memories, whether positive or negative, but you are creating memories. Create happy ones. Create happy memories. Do it intentionally. Unite the team. I've got your back. I'll talk about new traditions in just a minute, but have fun. Create laughter. The more you can create memories, the better it is. And that rolls right into traditions. Don't try to be the ex-parent. And I'll give you an example. If the ex-parent used to dress up as Santa Claus and then be that Santa Claus for the kids, don't try to do that. All that does is create that whole thing about, am I being loyal to that other person? Know which traditions you want to keep, which you want to stop, and which you want to start. Some of the traditions that we allowed is your ex always loved to have the girls for Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. And that was his thing. He loved it. It still does. So to this day, 15 years later, or almost 20 years later probably, he still has the girls and their now one spouse anyway, on Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. We've been flexible enough that we adjust that Christmas around other things or other families. My daughter's married to a gentleman, that great guy, but he also comes from a divorced family. So they have 4 different sets of parents that they're trying to juggle around Christmas. And it puts a lot of pressure on them. So we try to be as flexible as possible. So we don't force a tradition that we have to have a Christmas meal on Christmas Day. So for you, what are the traditions? Oh, another tradition that you created for the girls was a cookie palooza. And that's basically they bake cookies. Now that they're older, they can have something to drink at the same time. And then they actually use the cookies as gifts to give away. So it's a fun tradition.
Yeah, and I think some of those ideas as well can come from that dialogue with your children about how you want to envision your future and what you want to do. A lot of the start of this discussion was kind of heavy, right? It doesn't have to be hard. create some levity, create some moments for fun and enjoyment. And some of them will work and some of them won't work. Talking stick, I was pretty sure that wasn't going to work, and it did work. One of the other great things that we did is when we probably the first couple months we were all in the same house, Gerald went out one day and bought a whole bunch of Nerf guns. And so we turned the lights off at night in the house and we ran around the house. And honestly, to this day, I think that was a real inflection point because it demonstrated to our kids that we were capable of having fun, and it got us all, and it became a bit of a tradition.
Yeah,
right? For the next couple weekends, there was always, can we turn the lights out and play Nerf guns? So it doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be expensive. Just figure out how to create some memories.
And that wasn't even intentional. That was totally by accident. And in fact, one of our daughters says that was one of the breaking points of bringing everybody together. So, and it was just something that I thought, this will be fun. Let's shoot each other.
And I thought it was a terrible idea, but then I thought the talking stick was a terrible idea. So be open-minded, I guess, is my comment.
So now that you've created what that future looks like, and you know you're going to create happy memories, and you're going to plan for those, the next step is the detours. When you think about a Google Maps, they give you the starting point, your location, they give you the destination, and they give you a nice direct line. Life with a blended family is very messy. There is no straight line. That roadmap, again, remember, there's no one roadmap, and there's no one straight line. I will promise you there are detours. And we'll talk about now some of the detours that we had. I want to just share with you that there's a blended family fairy tale, and it goes like this. Once upon a time, we blended our family and we lived happily ever after. Does not exist.
Only on TV with the Brady Bunch.
Well, a lot of people won't know what the Brady Bunch is.
Okay, I'm dating myself a little bit.
But the statistics of a step family, and there's, when you Google it, you can see a number of different statistics. But traditionally, they're saying that 60% of families that have children from another marriage fail. Now, I don't know whether that's fully accurate. I don't know how truthful that is, but I do know it's high. There's a lot of reasons to it that we won't really get into a discussion tonight, but there are a lot of reasons to it. But you can overcome statistics. You don't need to be one of those statistics, and I want to just reassure you of that. And how long will you wait till you remarry? And for those of you that are contemplating it, statistics also show that the longer you wait, the better off it is, anything over 2 years. That doesn't mean that you have to. That's not good or bad or right or wrong. It doesn't mean that it won't work if you get married quicker, right? It doesn't mean that. What it just does mean is those are the statistics, and you don't need to be a statistic. So family and blended families, I want to share this, are not the same. The traditional families and the blended family are not the same. A lot of times we hear, they're the same. Yeah, they got some similarities. What are the differences? The major difference is you're not born into it. The children aren't born into it. What happens when you get together in your first marriage and you get children and you develop your parenting skills together and you have time together before children are there and you get to this nice honeymoon period and everything else. And then as children are born, they get, the parents develop their own parenting styles, but they do it together. And then all of a sudden there's more children and they're born together, so they trust each other naturally, and over time it just builds and builds and builds. Well, when you're blending a family, trust doesn't necessarily always occur right away. And you're not born into it. In fact, some of the children don't even have a decision about blending a family because you've made the decision for them. So all of a sudden now you're, again, trying to force that relationship. So those are some of the differences. And when you build your new relationship, it gets so new and there's romance and everything else. And a lot of times it gets so passionate and so easy to forget about the children. to forget that they are there and they need time. They need your time and your effort. And sometimes it can be really difficult finding that balance, which leads us to that, how will you know the right time? And for those of you that are in the middle or past this, then I'll apologize now, but I want to help some people out. If you're thinking about blending your family, how do you know the right time? Testing the waters. Do you know how when you go into one of the lakes, especially in Canada, you go in and you got to get used to the water and you say, oh, that's too cold. I don't know if I want to do this, right? Well, that's kind of the testing the water. So how do you test the water in a blended family? Well, one thing that we did was that even when we were still dating, I rented a VRBO and we went to Disney World. And so everybody had their own rooms and everything else. And we went to Disney World and we spent 3 or 4 days in Disney World.
And if you can't have fun in Disney World, you can't have fun anywhere.
Yeah, so if the family's not going to work in Disney World, guess what? You better pay attention. So that was good. So that went well. Everything went well. Then we went on a family trip to Montreal. And I don't know what happened from the time we left Calgary to the time we landed in Montreal, but one of Judy's daughters changed in that air. She was this lovely girl when we started in Calgary. As soon as we landed in Montreal, she was very, very mean to me. She was abrupt. She obviously didn't want me there. And what was interesting, because we discovered over a little time, she didn't even have any clue that this was happening, by the way. It wasn't on purpose. It wasn't because she thought I need to be mean. What happened was I was now on her family turf. Judy and the girls she had the girls in Montreal, so now we're in Montreal. We're going to visit family. Well, this is the turf that she and her dad had been on for forever. So now all of a sudden, I was an intruder into the family turf or the family team. So all of a sudden now she became from this nice new girl to this mean girl. And I was like, wow. But what it did for me, and I wanted to highlight this for you, what it did for me is to say, she's not quite ready yet. And actually that was one of the points that you and I had talked through, is that because we were pretty serious at that time, but it was one of those that we just knew she wasn't ready yet. And that's about testing the waters. And there's many different ways of doing that, but I wanted to give you those 2 examples to test the waters. We had family meals together before we actually moved in together and got married. We had family meals just to see how things were going and those kind of things. So those were some of the things that we did. One of the highlights, though, is to build relationship first, not family. And intentionally build relationships. I had to build relationships with each of the children of your girls separately, and you with mine. We need to build those relationships separately and intentionally. And when you start building those relationships, you start building trusting relationships. Trust is hard to restore once it's broken. And this is one of the differences between the traditional family and blended families. You need to build those trust. You need to build trust. You need to be consistent. They need to know who you are. And that's why you need to know yourself first before you can actually start sharing who you are to others. And once you start building those relationships over time, then you can allow relationships building stronger and stronger. The other thing is do not try to get into the middle of building relationships between children. If you try to jump into the middle of that, all you'll do is hinder those relationships. Give you an example. One day, we heard 2 of our daughters, one of her daughters fighting. They were arguing. Before I knew it, my daughter, whether it's good or bad, right or wrong, doesn't matter, she took your daughter's door off her bedroom because she slammed it at her. And she took it off for like 2 or 3 days. And all we heard was, Mom! But if we would have jumped into the middle of that, all of a sudden it's like, what do we do? How do you solve that? But we allowed that to go. And to this day, they have a great relationship.
Actually, probably one of the tightest ones. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, but she actually took her door off because she slammed it on her face. So my daughter said, forget that. We'll take the door off. And so it stayed that way for a couple of days before they worked it all out and everything else. So don't get into those relationships between the children. You can't control it. I'm sorry, you can't. You can try to guide it. You can try to talk it through, and you can be the mediator a little bit. But if you try to solve it, it isn't going to work. Let's go on. Changing of the birth order. This is one that is an interesting one. I don't know how many people believe that in birth order, but generally the oldest are always the more responsible. They're the ones who take on all that responsibility, and I got to take care of my little sister, etc., etc. But when you blend a family, those things may change. Somebody who's the oldest might now be the middle child. And so it's just something for you to pay attention to. It's not necessarily that you can't change it. It's going to happen the way it is. But you could pay attention to, you focus on responsibilities. They still need to, whoever the oldest was before, they still need to feel like they're responsible for things. How do you give them that feeling that they're still key? Those kind of things. So it's really to pay attention to the birth order when those things change. The other thing is that all of a sudden, like in our case, all of a sudden, her girls had a brother or a stepbrother. And all of a sudden now, there are differences between boys and girls, especially when you get a little bit older. And now all of a sudden, well, I'm the man, I'm the boy, and you got to listen and da da da. And so that causes some conflict, some interesting pieces as well. So it's now I now have a brother, or I now have a sister, or I now have 3 sisters when it came to my son. So all of a sudden he needed to kind of get his mind around that as well.
3 sisters who were all in puberty or early teenagehood.
The other one I wanted to highlight, and we discussed this a little bit way back when, but we want to have a baby together. Now what? And so one of the things I wanted to highlight for you is that with some families that I've worked with is that when they have that baby or they have that discussion with the baby, it's what is the impact on the whole family? Because all of a sudden now you've got 2 from one family, 2 from another from the other side, and basically now you have one that kind of is covering that's from both of you. And then what are the impacts of their perception? It might not be true, but their perception of favoritism, their perception of, well, now they're the favorite, because now, by the way, even in traditional families, the youngest everybody thinks that the youngest is always spoiled anyway, but this just magnifies it. I'm not saying do it, don't do it, good, bad, right, wrong. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. All I'm saying is make sure you think through the impacts of having that baby. When you start looking at that, after that, you start talking about, and it runs right from that favoritism into fair versus equal. One of the things with blended families, and even traditional families have to deal with this, but even more from a blended family point of view, and I'll give you 2 examples. Some of the struggles parents have with fair versus equal. Is fair always equal, or is equal fair, etc.? Had a blended family, had 3 children. One of the children had a bicycle that broke, and the bicycle was old. It wasn't worth repairing or irreparable. So anyway, the decision was to get a new bike. But to be fair, all 3 children needed to have a new bicycle. So for that, from a parent's point of view, they thought that fair and equal were the same. So that every child needed a new bike, even though the other 2 were still working. So that's one of the decisions around fair versus equal. And again, please don't read anything into it. I'm not saying good or bad, right or wrong. But what for your couple, for you as a couple, what's fair, what's equal? Give you one more example. One of the decisions of a family was to pay for half of post-secondary education. Well, what happens when you have one that goes to university and you're paying half for, Another one is going to trade school, which is a lot cheaper than university, and maybe it's an apprenticeship school. Another one decides not to go to school at all and goes out and gets jobs and starts working. And the fourth one goes to graduate school. What's fair and what's equal? Do you pay half? Does everybody get the same amount of money? Or is fair that you paid for half the university, you pay for half of the trade school or apprenticeship, you pay nothing for the one who didn't go anywhere, and then you pay half again for the master's degree? I'm not saying what the answer is, but what I'm saying is...
We still haven't figured it out, actually.
What I'm saying is the answer has to be discussed, and you've got to come to an agreement as a couple. And you can have that discussion with your kids. And by the way, when it comes to legacy and it comes to those kind of things, these same decisions come. So when you whatever financially you're going to leave, or maybe it's a house, or maybe it's, I believe legacy, more important is your wisdom and your knowledge and your beliefs. But there's a lot of struggle around financial legacy, about what's fair and what's equal. And then favoritism, because favoritism is a perception from your children. It's not necessarily the truth, by the way. Even with our kids, they remember things that happened a lot differently than we do. But again, it's about their perception. Do you remember the story about Brené Brown? The story I'm telling myself is, but it's the story they're telling themselves about favoritism or about fairness or about equality.
And I'm a little bit competitive, so my dialogue to the kids is, yeah, today you're my favorite, and guess what, guys? It's up for grabs for tomorrow, so try your best.
For sure. So, moving on from the fairy tale, the other piece of the fairy tale is the children did not choose this relationship or this family or this team or this tribe. So what happens, and there's no guarantees, by the way, so what happens if it becomes a nightmare? What happens if it's your nightmare? What do you do? And we know of a family that, and again, it's not ours, but it was very similar to ours, where there was two teenage children and two teenage children, and they tried to combine this. They moved into the same house, but they could never build a home. And so what happened was there was conflict, and there was arguing, and there was pain and suffering. And basically what they ended up doing was a house came for sale just down the road, and they actually bought the second house, and they split homes again. And so one parent was living with their two teenage children. You can't leave them alone. Heaven help. And there was another home with the other parent and teenage children. Now, ultimately, that marriage didn't last, not surprisingly, probably. But that's how they tried to combine it. That was their nightmare that they had to live through. So what do you do? How do you behave? And it's easier to talk about it before. So if the tough times come, it's easier to talk about it now before they're there than all of a sudden. So how do you want to be? Who do you want to be when the going gets tough? And it's just having that discussion, and you hope that it never happens. But who do you want to be? How do you want to discuss it? We talked about that if things got really tough, the first thing we would do is go, you and I, pull us aside and discuss it. Before we talked about it with the kids or anything else, we went away and had that discussion. We went away and discussed that situation. So that's kind of really, there's no guarantees. So what would you do, and how do you want to be if it's a nightmare? Some of the other tough topics in it is about love. And it's about, where's the honeymoon period? That's the first thing about love, is that especially if one of the partners does not have children, all of a sudden now they're coming into a marriage, and it's maybe their first one, maybe it's not. But all of a sudden now there is no honeymoon period. For those of you that have blended a family, was there a honeymoon period? I doubt it. You might have had a honeymoon, but not that honeymoon period of a year or 6 months where all of a sudden it's like all about you and all about the two of you, etc. The other thing is who's on first? During that time, who's on first? Is your children on more a priority, or is your new spouse the priority? And that goes on, by the way, for years. Why don't you share what you told me when we first got together?
So I had been a single mom for quite a long time, and I think for those of you who have been single parents, you understand it creates a bit of a different relationship with your children. And so when we started getting serious and we started talking about blending a family and some of the challenges that might be, I was very clear with Gerald, and I don't know if it was right or wrong, but I said to him, you'll never come between me and my children. My children are young, they need me. I will always be there for them first, which is a very different equation than when you come into a marriage at the beginning and you're there for your partner. And again, I don't know if that was the right thing or the wrong thing to say. Gerald was extremely patient, and now our kids are launched, and it is mostly about him. But that was again, when we talk about non-negotiables, as a mom, I wanted to make sure that my kids never felt that they were put in second place because I chose to get remarried.
So we've shared this piece many times to many different couples, and I have seen all kinds of reactions. Some being, what? Others being, oh, I get that. So wherever you're reacting to, here's the keys. It's not right or wrong. It's not bad or good, but it's a starting point. So when you said that, we actually had some conversations around what that actually meant. Well, when you say that, am I forcing you to choose between us? Like, I want your love and you can't love them, or what was it? But it was more about, if you demand so much time from me that I can't be a mom, that's not going to work. So she may have put it that way, but I knew what she understood. And by the way, there were times, just so you know, I want to be totally upfront, there were times that I did feel second fiddle. But there were also times that I felt like I was the most important guy in the world. And so those are the things that you need to do. You need to pay attention to those kind of things. Make sure that your partner feels important. The other piece, will my stepchild ever love me? Will I ever love my stepchild? The second question, will you ever love your stepchild? I fully believe that you will. Will you love them as if they were your blood, somebody you had given birth to or were there with birth? Maybe not. But I do believe you will love them. Will they love you? It will take time. We tell all our kids that we love them. And it wasn't probably until maybe the last year and a half that I finally got from one of the girls, I love you too. And that's 15 years or 14 years. So it's not going to happen overnight. Now, this same person didn't really say I love you to many people. So it's not it's not a huge shock.
Not a warm and fuzzy kid.
But it took that long before I got, and I love you. So don't count on those things, but if you keep giving love and consistently give love, it will come back in some manner or form. The other thing I want to caution you about is comparing your life before blended family and after blended family. Comparisons generally don't work anyway, but if you start comparing before and after, it's a no-win situation. And it might be where, before I was miserable and now it's great. But comparisons generally never. You can always find a family that's happier, a family that's richer, a family that's poorer, a family that's sadder. Relationships are worse, relationships are better. Comparisons are just a game you don't want to play. Be happy where you are. find the spot where you are. And if you're not happy, make those changes. One of the tough topics that all couples need to talk about, especially around blended family, finances, money, and then wills and estates. Judith, this is your specialty. Why don't you share?
So I think, money is a difficult topic even in what I would call a more traditional marriage. But when you blend a family, you have child support payments, you might have spousal support payments, you might have some alimony payments, you might have brought in some debt into the relationship that was not yours to begin with. You might have some added expenses. I know when we blended the family, we got married, we chose to buy a bigger house so everyone could have their own bedroom. So it's really important that you sit down with your partner ahead, and it's not very romantic, but talk through the money situation. Who makes what? Who spends what? Who has what? And then come up with a plan. Nothing's even in the world. If one of you is making an income here and one of you is making an income here, maybe prorate some expenses. Do what's fair. Fair is not necessarily equal. Figure out, have some advanced discussions about what your obligations are to spousal support or child support. Understand that is a legal requirement and there's not a lot you can do about that, and that's part of taking care of your family. And for some of you, if there is a huge difference between net worth between the two partners, you might even want to talk about a prenuptial agreement. Just to ensure that if something happens in the relationship or something happens in terms of a premature death, that people are taken care of. And I had to laugh because when I got remarried, first of all, my parents were very happy that I got remarried because now I had someone to take care of me. They were also, my father, and I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but my parents are kind of pre-internet and pre-computer. So it was a cutout article from the newspaper that was mailed to me in snail mail. And it was about a woman who got remarried and then passed away, and her new husband took all her money and gave none of it to her kids. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting article. Like, what? So, again, it was out of concern. My father wanted to make sure that I was being financially responsible. We decided very early in our marriage that we were just going to blend everything. We were going to have joint bank accounts. We were going to put things together. We were going to help pay off each other's debt. That may or may not be the right answer for your family.
Except our visas.
Yes, we still have. I could never share my visa with him because I just like having my own visa. Things like savings, things like expenses, things like your budget. Talk about it, work it through. It's not going to be a one size fits all, and you might have to adapt it as things go on. The other one that you do need to talk about as well is what happens if one of you is no longer there? What happens if one of you can no longer work? Death, disability. Those are not great topics. So those are topics you have to talk about beforehand. Do you have a will? What does your will say? Are your kids, if there's another parent, a former parent, a second parent, what would happen to them if all of a sudden one of you were no longer there and they had to move back to another house? What does that look like? Do you have life insurance? If you go buy a big house together to house all the family and you take on some more debt, what happens if one of you passes away? Do you need to supplement that with a small life insurance policy? So there's lots of experts out there. There's lots of, resources out there. We could spend an hour and a half just going through that, and it's pretty boring stuff. But what I'm encouraging you to do is have the conversation. And then just before we leave that topic, there is, the chances of a healthy young person becoming disabled is much greater than you actually dying prematurely. So one of the documents in your preparation is called a personal directives, which takes care of you in case you can't take care of yourself. And it really hit home. I mean, I do this for a living. I always encourage my clients to have one. It really hit home to me about 3 years ago when someone in our family became very, very sick and had to go on life support. And there was no personal directive. And it tore the family apart because part of the family said no, she wouldn't want to live this way. And the other part of the family said, no, let's do everything we can to sustain life. And it was just a really gut-wrenching couple of weeks watching this unfold. And when it was done, I was like, if I ever become like that, just pull the plug, like, rah, rah, rah. And Gerald looked at me and said, so you know what? Now that our kids are adults, you need to have that discussion with your daughters. Because in your personal directives, if I'm your personal attorney for your personal directives, and it's very clear that, and I'm sorry I'm being so crass, that you want me to pull the plug, he says, you need to explain that to your girls, that is what you want and that's what you instructed me to do. So it was interesting because we got that piece in place, but it was only, 20 years later or 15 years later where we talked about, the communication part of that piece as well. Okay? So as hard as money is as a topic, have that discussion.
So finances and estate planning, two of the toughest ones. Probably the toughest one for us, the toughest kind of discussion was around partnering or parenting. And we had to make a decision about whether we were going to parent each other's children or whether we were just going to be a supportive partner and I was going to be a strong adult influence to her girls and you to my kids. And so we chose that I would not be the parent. They didn't want another dad anyway, and my kids did not want another mom. They had a mom. So it was more about how we were going to, first of all, partner or parent, and we decided that we wouldn't parent each other's. And there were times that I really had to bite my tongue because I wanted to say something. I wanted to do that correction or that discipline or whatever that was, and I had to bite my tongue, and then we would talk about it, and then Judy would either decide to address it with her kids or not. The parenting styles is another piece, is that we had to work on our parenting styles because all of a sudden we had different parenting styles. What I believed was being loving and patient and kind, she thought was, well, you can't let them get away with that, right? And so we had to work through that. And then the final piece of that is what I call is the not my child attack. And this was the biggest piece that we even struggle with still today. I want to be honest with you and up front, the not my child attack. So I would say something about my kids, and about 2 days later, she might say the exact same thing, but what I'm hearing is, I'm a bad parent, or my child's bad, or my child's not good, but she might be saying the exact same thing that I just said out loud to in our discussions 2 days ago. But as soon as she said it, it was an attack. And we had many different discussions like this. And I just wanted to highlight this for you, is that this is a significant one. This breaks families, blended families, because all of a sudden the parenting styles and you're feeling like you're attacking each other's children, and we are all biological parents first. They become dear to our hearts. And as soon as somebody says bad to them, this if you think of the mama bear, all of a sudden the mama bear is ready to attack and protect. And that's how we are with our own children. So when even your new partner says something, it's an attack on your children. And it's like your back gets up and you get arguments and disagreements. So you need to just pay attention to those things and work through those things and have those discussions, those hard discussions when you say, hold on a second, I think you're attacking me. And it wasn't the way it was intended. Have that talk. I need to push through. We're running out of time. The creating space and time for your family. Where are you going to live? Who has bedrooms? If you're moving into if you're moving into a house that's existing, that a lot of times it's where one family's already in. How do you get the right bedrooms? Because all of a sudden the children that were there, they're feeling like people are moving into their space. It's theirs. It's their bedroom. How dare you want to share it now? So it's the creating the time and space. If you could create space with everybody having a bedroom, great, do it. If you can't, find a space where they can go, each of you, including yourselves, but especially your children, that can go and just be alone with themselves, alone with their thoughts, where they're not going to be bugged. And maybe that's a special chair, maybe it's in the garage, maybe they need to go for a walk, but have a discussion as a family. When they're here, we need to leave them alone. Have that space for them. The transition of, and I'm moving to the next slide, the transition of, we're so busy. The scheduling of the family, we had one in hockey, we had one in soccer, we had one in equestrian, and then my son was older, so he kind of did his own thing. But all of a sudden, we're running back and forth, and then some of the arrangements were my daughter was with her mom at some times, and then she was home, and your girls were with their dad on weekends, and we're juggling back and forth. The transition between households, there are different rules, different routines, different things going on in different households. So all of a sudden, when they come back, they got to get used to it again. So what do? Here's my thoughts, is to create a transition time. If they come home and they just need a little bit of time by themselves, give them that. But then get together as a family. Talk about what happened the last week while they were gone. What happened over the weekend? What's going on in the future? How are we doing? How are you feeling? Tell me about your week, right? Kind of go back and just reconnect. Have that time of reconnect. And that will help your kids transition and will help them through those transitions between households. And if you have a great relationship with your ex-partner, then it would be great to have those and try to have that consistency back and forth. A lot of times, that consistency you can't force. So just a heads up to around transition. The other important thing, family meals. Have family meals together. It is proven that relationships are built, and this is for business, by the way, as well as for families, as well as for other relationships. Relationships are built stronger, quicker, and better over meals. If you have a relationship you're trying to build, have a meal together. That's why family meals are so important. We used to, even when our kids were older, when they all moved out, what we created was a family meal every Sunday night. We didn't pressure it. We said, only come when you want. You do not need to come. But you know what? All our kids were there every week because they loved it. They love the reconnect piece. We don't do it every week now, but every once a month, I think we're still trying to get everybody together. We now have 2 great grandkids, and we need to have
grandkids, not great grandkids.
Sorry, grandkids. No, they're great though. They are great.
They are great. But they're
is what I meant. They're fantastic.
They're a lot more fun than kids, actually.
Yes, but we still have family meals together, and we try to create that connection. So I would really encourage you, even if your kids are older, have a time of family meals and have those things. Family meetings, if you have serious things going on or you need to discuss things like finances, things like legacy, things like those kind of things, have family meetings. Change leads to fear and conflict. So those things that happen, who's the enemy? Is there an enemy? A lot of times parents or one of the step-parents feel like they're the enemy. And a lot of it is perception from the children because they think you're trying to be their mom or trying to be their dad or trying to instill discipline on them, whatever that is. But a lot of times you feel like the enemy. And where do you fit in? Especially, again, if one of the partners doesn't have children, how do they fit in? And you know how when families share memories, it's important to share memories. Remember that one slide. But a lot of times when people share memories, the other people that weren't part of that memory feel like left out. But that's okay. share your memory around that, or share a different memory with your children. Remember that time we went camping, right? Have those kind of things, but don't be afraid of those memories. But again, allow them to fit in. The ripple effect, and I wanted to just share this with you as well, is that we had a few different situations, and we're running out of time, so I won't share them right now. You'll have to maybe come to a workshop or something. But when something happens in a house, and whether it's a discussion, or maybe parents are discussing something, or I'm talking about your ex or something, and all of a sudden it gets into a different household, and it gets your ex's household, or whatever it is, however you talk in front of your kids, or how the kids talk together, it has a ripple effect on the other house. If your kids overhear you bad-mouthing your ex, guess what? They're taking that over there. And by the way, if it's shared enough over there, you're going to get a phone call, or you're going to get negativity coming your way. So whatever you have happen, there's a ripple effect. And I want you just to be aware of that. Be really careful about what you say in front of your children. Be careful of what they say and how it's shared between households, because they're going back and forth. Also, ripple effects around weddings and concerts and sporting events and everything else. So all of a sudden now everybody's in one place. How do you get along? How do you behave? Right? Especially in weddings, there's a lot of pressure. Who's going to walk the bride down the aisle? Who's going to say the toast? What are you going to say, or how are you going to say it when you honor the bride or honor the groom? Those things all come into play. We've been there. Those were interesting times. When you all show up at the same soccer championship game, how do you behave? Where do you go? Crisis situations. Wow. There's a lot of crisis situations, and how it brings out good and bad behavior. You can choose what behavior you have. One of the things I always share with my coaching clients is to have a mountaintop view. So when you start looking at crisis situations, you start looking at weddings, what is the mountaintop view? I want you to just close your eyes for one quick second. Just listen to my description. You're now standing especially for Calgary area, it's easy to do. You're now on the top of one of the mountains. You're looking around. You see the beauty of the majesty of all the mountains around you. You look down and you can see the valley, and you can see maybe there's a waterfall coming down one of the mountains. You can see in the valley that there's a river, and you can see that in some places there's rapids. Other places it's nice and calm. And if it's a summertime, you can actually see the meadows. You can see the wildflowers. Well, your life is like that. Sometimes you're trying to climb a mountain, and it's hard. Other times you're down in the rapids, and you can hardly keep your head above the water, and you're feeling like you're going to drown. Other times in our lives, in the meadows with a picnic, and you can hear the kids running and the kids laughing and playing and having fun. Other times you're floating down the river. All these times are parts of your life. In your blended family, you will experience them all. There will be rapids. There will be time when you're thinking of climbing the mountain. There will be times when you're in the meadows, and there'll be times when you're just floating down the river just nicely. The great news is you can live together. You can be together, and you'll make it through. And you will. I promise. Just need some help. Need some support along the way. The detours. Those are the detours. Those are some of the challenges that you'll face. So what now? What is working? And so I want you to take this away. I want you to answer each of these questions in the next 2 slides. What is working? And then what's not working? What's working for you? What's working for your family? And what's not working for you? What's not working for your family? And what would you like to change? And the next set of questions, once you answer those, then you can say, what now? What personal action do you need to take? What do you need to do for yourself? And then what do you need to do as a couple? And then what do you need to do as a family? I have my contact information. The next few slides and are all around different resources. And maybe you can just pop there. There's DISC personality assessments, and you can contact me if you're interested in it. There's 5 love languages that I would suggest everybody reads by Gary Chapman. 7 principles for making marriage work. If you're having struggles in your marriage, read the 7 principles for making marriage work by John Gottman. It's a great resource. Step Parenting, 51-minute do's and don'ts. It's a great little read. It's quick hits, and it's what to do and what not to do. Brené Brown, we talked about her. I'm releasing my own workbook at some point in time, hopefully soon. I've been working on it for a while. It's going to be a workbook for coaching blended families. And so if you're interested in that, just contact me, send me a note, and I will keep you informed on that progress. Also available are personal discussions, my contact information. The next couple of slides are around values, and it's the values, what are the values, core values, and what are the exercises. So I think what we'll do is we'll stop there, and I want to thank you. Were there any questions at all, Josh?
Yeah, so those watching online, in front of the camera, those watching online, thank you guys for tuning in, and for live audience, and for Gerald and Judith, thank you guys for your time tonight. If there is any further questions, I know the recording will be posted out and sent to all the church as well next week. If you guys have any questions that are watching the recording or the posting, yeah, like we said, the contact information is there. Also, we'll post the slides up in a PDF on the website if you guys are okay with that. And all the information will be on there as well, so you guys can contact. You guys do private coaching as well? Okay. Yeah, so you guys can contact them for further interest as well. And he's on LinkedIn, Gerald is. So, yeah, why don't we just give them a round of applause? Thank you guys for coming tonight. And we so appreciate all the valuable insights you've shared today. So,
Great. So thank you so much to everybody. We are very open to, we like coffee. So if you'd like to go for a coffee or you like anything like that, we'd be more happy to discuss anything with you. Final words?
Just thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. And thanks for allowing us to share our story. And go live your best life.
You have a website, yes.
the recording will be posted at community-hub.ca for those that want to share it with friends or neighbors or family. Thanks.
Thank you.